Hi, everyone. I see that we have folks signing in, so we'll give everybody just a moment. Thank you for being here for our third Watch What Happens Live mock interview session. We're really excited to have new information for you. And just really excited to share this new information with you, as well as have you watch our mock interviews. So we'll just give everybody just another minute or two. Okay, perfect. All right, wow, we're almost at 600 participants. This is great. This is absolutely wonderful. Okay, I think just for the reason of time and all the information we want to share, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today, the third installment of our Watch What Happens Live mock interviews with real admissions officers. Today, what we'll have are two mock interviews between admissions representatives and two current medical students. And we'll have both the standard interview questions, and for our first time, we get to do a multiple mini interview or MMI scenario. As a reminder to everyone, all audience members are muted and your cameras are off automatically. We will take questions at the end of the two mock interviews, so please post your questions in the Q&A section. And this session is being recorded for those who cannot attend today's live session or for you to view it again. So welcome to our panelists. My name is Maria Jose Araya. I'm the Learner Engagement Manager at the AAMC and also your moderator for today. Today with us, we have two medical students volunteering that are members of our Learner Engagement Group, as well as two admissions officers. Dr. Julie Linton, the Associate Dean for Admissions at University of South Carolina of Medicine, Greenville. Dr. Liesl Copeland, Director of Admissions and Medical Education at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. LaDon Navari, who's one of our students. They're an M3 at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. And finally, we have our M2 Atif Niaz at Eastern Virginia Medical School. So again, we're going to go ahead and get started. It probably seems a little quick, but we just want to get into it and share all of this with you. So what we're going to have first is our interview between Dr. Linton and LaDon Navari.
LaDon, it's so great to meet you. Welcome to Greenville. I wanted to just begin by asking you, what would you like me to tell our admissions committee about your candidacy for medical school?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So I think I want the admission committee to know that I'm a very creative person. I have very diverse background that I think based on my own personal experience and also from interacting with patients, having these kind of backgrounds, especially like diverse background coming from different culture, being a female, these are all different things that matter when providing care to patients. So I think my background experiences that, especially if I have made a mistake and I've learned from it, these all make me a stronger applicant and a better provider. So I think I would be a very good physician based on these experiences, and I hope that the admission team takes those into consideration as well.
Great, thank you so much. And could you please share an example of something you've been involved in longitudinally and how that impacted you?
Yes, so like I mentioned earlier, I moved to the United States when I was a senior in high school. So when so my experience in college has been slightly different from peers, especially as a commuter. I didn't have the same exposure as everyone else did, but something that was almost life-changing that happened for me recently was getting involved in research. So I think a lot of people view research as an opportunity to learn more about science, which I am learning a lot, but I think it had extra value for me because I was now part of a team that also had diverse backgrounds. So I got to learn more about different cultures, bond over those experiences, and that alone, aside, in addition to my research endeavors, made me a better person and better gave me a better understanding of other people's backgrounds. So, especially one of my most significant experiences recently with research. So I got involved in research when I was a sophomore in college, and as a junior, I'm still involved in research. And one of my most profound experiences was being involved in the Aspire program, which is a research program where medical students from underrepresented backgrounds in healthcare field or those from disadvantaged backgrounds are matched with a mentor to conduct research. And I was lucky to work with Dr. Ghoshal. And in our lab, we studied, of course, different modifications in RNA, but something that was most important for me was to be able to receive mentorship for the first time from another immigrant PhD student, and being able to provide mentorship once my summer research term was over to the upcoming class as well. So that has been something that I've been involved in throughout college, and also connecting to other immigrants and helping them find their way around as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And can you share an example of a time that you experienced failure? How did you handle it, and what did you learn?
Yes, I think I would have a hard time calling it failure because I look at these experiences as positive things that help shape my personality and make me more mature, I would say. But when I was about to just start college, I obviously, just like everyone else, I looked into different college programs. I was very uneducated and unaware, didn't do enough research on the financial aspect of applying to college. So I decided to attend a college that was out of state for me, and also a place where I didn't know anyone. But a few weeks before I was about to perform my typical exams that we do at the beginning of enrollment into college, I realized that if I were to attend that college, then I would have to pay private tuition, very high cost for me and my family, and it would have been a lot of stress for both of us, for everyone in the family. So I decided to defer the offer for college for a semester, and instead, during that time, which was very stressful for me because I knew that I wanted to pursue medicine and this was a gap for me, I decided to work and financially support my siblings pursuing college education at that time. And it was a very profound experience because it was my first job, first time being financially independent and also helping other members of my family. And eventually I ended up going to my dream college, so everything worked out.
That's amazing. Well, Livon, it was so wonderful to meet you today. Thank you so much. And I will look forward to being in touch.
Thank you so much.
So we will do a little bit of feedback now on your interview. And first I would say, how do you think it went?
I think in general, it's better to use less pause words, which I used a lot, but obviously it's a little bit more difficult to remember things that have happened a few years ago. But I think I engaged well with the interviewer, having like a positive attitude about things, and also having positive attitude about difficult questions is very important, and saying, like, indicating that if there's a flaw or if there's a negative experience that you've learned from it. So I think I did a relatively good job on that, but it always helps to practice, just so that things common questions are just coming easily.
Yes, and I would agree with you on your answer to the third question around failure was really, really wonderful. You did exactly what we want you to do, which is you turned something that didn't go as planned and didn't go well into a strength. And I think that was really outstanding. On your first question, you did talk a little bit about some things about yourself, and I think you could have had some more specificity. So I asked you specifically, what would you like to tell the committee about your candidacy for our medical school? And this is a chance to highlight a couple things that are really unique about you. So you shared that you come from a diverse background, but perhaps sharing in there what language you speak and how that relates to the local community of my medical school, so that I know that you'll be serving our communities. So that could be like a highlight, or a particular experience you've had that would demonstrate your adaptability in your team-based care. And so I think you highlighted some personal characteristics, but having an example that's brief to back that up can really, really help me to remember you as I'm reviewing the hundreds of students that we interview. And then the second question was providing an example of something you've been involved in longitudinally. And you had some real gems in there, especially really talking about what you learned from being on a team in research, I think really stood out to me. I would have loved for you to share what you actually did research on, and demonstrate a little bit of excitement about the topic, because a lot of students do research just to box check, and we are not really excited about the box check. We're excited that you're excited about what you're learning. And then again, I thought you really nailed the failure question, and I think that was awesome. Otherwise, you maintained great eye contact, which was wonderful. You were personable, you were relatable. I wanted to continue the conversation with you. I felt like I had a lot more to learn, and that's all the feelings you want to leave somebody with at the end of an interview.
I definitely agree. So thank you.
Well, thank you both. We will move on to our second mock interview now, which will be our multiple mini interview or MMI scenario with Dr. Copeland and Atif.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you. My name is Lisa Copeland, and I welcome you to this station.
Hi, Dr. Copeland. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Sure. So I know you had a little bit of a moment to review the scenario, but I'll go ahead and read it out to you again and then give you time to respond to that scenario. So this station, the MMI scenario, is you are a second-year medical student preparing for your end-of-year examinations. 1 week before your examinations, you have a molecular cell and disease coursework due. One of your friends has just emailed you a selection of the coursework completed by students in prior years for the same project. Explain your actions that you would take.
Sure, yeah. That's not an easy situation, because I understand that my friend is maybe just trying to help me out, but at the same time, ethically, it feels a little murky, more than just a little murky, I should say. And I mean, I'm sitting here right now wondering that, do I report them? Do I just choose to ignore it? Do I, because it's very kind of, is inaction being complicit in something that's, potentially negative? And, because as, hopefully a future physician, to me, my code of ethics and my moral standard is very important. So I feel like maybe I would reach out to my friend and ask them that they don't share that anymore. And, tell them how important the honor code is, and, we shouldn't be messing with that. And, tell them I don't want to report them, but, at the same time, it's important that we protect the integrity of our classwork and, or again, our reputations. And, depending on how that goes with my classmate, if they just kind of ignore me or blow me off or something, I really wouldn't like to, but maybe I would bring it up to administration. But yeah, I don't know, I just hope I never have to deal with that.
Thank you. And I had one follow-up question for you. If your friend did blow you off and just didn't listen to that perspective of the importance of the professionalism and your reputation, I suppose, in the field, how might you approach the administration? What concerns would you bring to, whether it's the course director or someone that you're thinking of going to?
Sure. Hopefully, because I know that at certain schools, there are ways of like anonymously reporting things like this. So I would maybe do that. I would try to be as, in a way, non-specific as possible, because I don't even know if my friend is the one originating it, or, maybe they're just like a really thoughtful person who's maybe a little misguided on this and they're just trying to help others out. But I would hate to, it's not like I'm going to go straight to administration and say, my friend did this and, kick him out and, stuff like that. But I imagine it wouldn't be the first time the administration is dealing with something like this either, right? So it would be some sort of, I don't know, I would probably find like an administrator I'm a little closer with and try to just approach them directly also. I feel like situations like this, the human interaction can help out a little bit, and kind of just pick their brains on it.
Hey, thank you. And it is a little shorter than regular mine, but I think we can go ahead and move into the feedback stage.
Sure.
So I'll start, as with the other one, is how did you think it went?
I'll be honest, it could have been amazing or it could have been terrible because I've never done an MMI before. And, because there's sort of what you can imagine of like the letter of the law of, okay, if somebody's cheating, you need to cut that out. But it's also, there is nuance in life. And, as a physician, I mean, obviously there's certain lines that you don't cross, but at the same time, you need to kind of understand maybe where other people are coming from and all that. So trying to strike that balance, I feel like is tough because you don't want to just seem like you're flip-flopping all the time either.
Okay. I do think that's the classic sort of line in walking the MMI scenario. It's that ability to definitely be clear that you can respond to a situation, that you have an answer, but also admitting that there are gray zones, that you do need to consider multiple perspectives, and how do you negotiate that? How do you think through it? And so I think a couple of things you did well. So definitely that talking about the focusing on, it's really important for the profession that this is not just about sharing the homework, right? This is about that cheating. This is about the ethics and my role as a future doctor to be a trustworthy person. I think that it was also nice that you were concerned for your friend, that you were thinking about what is making them do this and how might I support the friend in addition. So that thinking out loud you did was also a useful thing. I think it could have been a little bit clearer about that clear line of I'm definitely not going to use this because of these other concerns. I also think, and I was trying to take notes here, that you could have involved a little bit more of next steps, but often there is time for probing there's often times for probing in that scenario. So usually, like at our school, we give you 7 minutes. You probably are going to have your discussion in 4 to 5 minutes. Then there's a minute or two of asking a follow-up question and probing. So you usually do get a chance to go a little bit further. I really liked the end too, that ability to ask for help. So I know this is wrong. I know that I want to support my friend. I know I want to make sure that my classmates and myself are living up to the professional code of ethics. I'm not sure how to navigate this situation. And so I'm going to ask administration because I know that they've navigated it before. And so I want them to be aware. I want a solution to happen, but I'm willing to ask for help about that. So I thought that was a great addition that you added into that scenario. Did you have any other questions about thoughts?
No, it's yeah, because it's I mean no, it's
Okay. And I think with MMI, there's certainly right and wrong answers, because certainly if you had said, oh yes, that would definitely help me out, I'm going to use this homework, that's a clear wrong answer, right? But for the right answers, there's lots of ways to do it right. And so that expanding of maybe, offering to sit with your friend and helping to work on the project if it is a joint project, if that was allowed, or like there's different directions in which you can get it right. And so I think that's one of the lovely things about the MMI, is that it's really that thinking in the moment of time, that reflection on how can I draw from my own experiences, from my knowledge, from my values to respond to this scenario, and being okay and comfortable that you can, that we want to hear what your responses are, and that you're not looking for that one ideal response, that there's a lot of ways that you can go. So thank you, and thank you for your time.
yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, thank you so much. That was very, very quick, a lot quicker than we anticipated. So we appreciate that, because that'll give us lots of time for our Q&A. Just one moment. All right, and if I just want to give a moment to any conclusions or takeaways that anybody wanted to add before we get into the Q&A. So Dr. Copeland, Dr. Linton, Atif, Ladan, does anyone have any final words based on what you just experienced that you'd love to share with our audience?
I think one thing that I would add for both scenarios, both MMIs and the traditional interviews, is that it's okay to pause and think for a moment, particularly when you get questions that are really, really difficult. So there might be a question you get around a situation that you need to think of an example because it's not something you're prepared. It's okay to say, excuse me for one moment, let me just pause and think and allow your brain to work. We would much rather that than you answer without an answer. And so that's one other thing that we see sometimes, and it actually shows a level of maturity.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was actually asked several times in regards to the pause. Would that be looked at negatively, or should it be a time where I just take a moment, compose myself, and think about an answer? Anyone else? I want to make sure I give you time. If not, yes, please.
Just one thing,
please,
just
Dr.
to
Linton.
follow up on that. I think especially with the virtual interviews, I would add to that idea of orienting your interviewer. So the asking for, can I have a moment to think about this? Or like with the MMI, I just want to take a moment to reread the scenario, make sure I addressed everything I wanted to. So just to let them know where your eyes are going, what you're doing, is perfectly acceptable.
Also, another question that I was going to ask, especially in this virtual interview world, I think there's a lot of concern about what will be perceived in a specific way, especially regarding eye contact, camera position, etc. But if we don't have any additional takeaways, we will move into our actual Q&A. And we have lots of general operational questions about interviews, days and interviews. So I'll start with those. Anyone can answer. Obviously, our admissions professionals would probably be the ones who know the most, but please, if you have something to share for our students as well, please do. So there was a question about, obviously this was only you mentioned a shorter MMI. What would the normal length of an interview or MMI be? And what should the length of a response be in either situation?
I'll start with that one. It does vary from school to school. So typically you're given a couple minutes to read the scenario, think about it outside of the interview. And then you're given, so we do 2 minutes of reading and thinking about that scenario. It can vary from 1 to 4 minutes of time to think about it. And then in the station itself, again, it can vary. We give 6 minutes in that station. I think it can be as short as 3 minutes and long as 10 minutes. So it's something that you should look into when you get that interview offer. Look at that website, research that school, figure out what is their scenarios like, how do they run the MMI, how many stations. As for response back, again, sometimes there's a scenario that's more complicated. It's going to take longer to think about it and report about it and respond back to it. And some scenarios a little bit more direct. And so it's going to be shorter. I think that most schools know what works for their scenario since they're giving you a comfortable amount of time. They're giving you a time where the vast majority of students will finish with maybe a minute to spare. So be confident, definitely practice that. Make sure that that's the biggest thing, is being comfortable with, okay, I've got 5 minutes to give a response. See what it feels like to talk for 4 minutes. What all can you present? How does it go? And once you get that, you realize that's a very doable thing.
I think for us, one unique thing about our school for our MMIs is that we actually utilize our standardized patient pool for our scenarios. So the same patients that are teaching you how to do a history and physical examination when you're in your clinical training are the same pool of people that are actually interviewing our candidates for 4 of our 5 scenarios. And so they're not scenarios where you're expected to know anything clinical. They're more about communication skills, critical thinking skills, but it is definitely a little bit different of a model. And then we do a little bit more back and forth in ours rather than a 4-minute response. There's more kind of interaction back and forth. So I think to Dr. Copeland's point, each school is a little bit different. I do think that really utilizing that 1 to 5 minutes of prep to review the scenario and being thoughtful about what are the key points I want to get across in this can really help you to set yourself up for success in those brief interactions.
Wonderful. Those were really important answers, especially as applicants prepare not only for one interview, but possibly multiple schools. They need to be flexible and ready to experience any and all, but also make sure that they are composed enough to give a suitable answer that'll represent them. We had a question about, in our examples, we just went from question to question. Does that mirror how it is, or is it a little more conversational, or both, depending?
I think this is, again, a difference between schools. At our school, we use a matrix system of questions so that we ensure that every candidate gets the same questions so that there's consistency across the process. So ours tends to be question, 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 and then some conversation at the beginning and at the end. And I wanted you to see what that looked like to kind of jump from question to question as part of this very brief mock interview. I would, again, be flexible with what you're open for because each school is going to do it a little bit differently. And there's always a rationale behind why it's being done a certain way. So I think the reality is going in and trusting the process rather than trying to figure it out will help you to focus on you selling yourself rather than trying to figure out what we're looking for. There's nothing I'd like less at the end of a question than somebody asking me, how did I do with that question? And I'm like, no, this isn't time for feedback today. You can get feedback after the cycle. Really keep focusing on sharing your content.
I do. I love that of you are having a conversation, even if it is one-sided. And so keeping that in mind and keeping in mind that we want to hear from you. So yes, sometimes it's going to be jumping from question to question, and sometimes it may be more probing. But don't try to pitch it for a particular thing. Be honest and be reflective on what you're bringing to the table.
LaDon or Atif, would you like to share anything in regards to that? It's okay if you don't. Nope. All right. Dr. Linton, you again answered a question that was asked about, does everyone get the same questions? So it is standardized so that everyone has an equal opportunity. All interviewees will receive the same scenarios and questions during their interviews. So there is, oh, please.
If we could just interrupt you for a second. For
Yes,
the
of course, if I
MMI,
was, please.
Yeah, I think it will vary. Often, most schools do use some type of blueprint. And so there's a purpose behind each scenario, but they may not use the exact same scenario. So those scenarios are blueprinted against what they're trying to get at it, and it's the bigger, broader content area. And I think similarly for the one-on-one interviews, there's a guide for the question. So it may not be literally word for word the exact, but there is a similar sort of rationale behind what questions are being asked to each applicant.
Thank you. Thank you for that really important clarification. We've had some audience members ask if they, at the end of their interview, if there is time, could they ask for feedback from the interviewer? Or should they?
I personally would not recommend that. And then there's two reasons why. Number one is some schools use a broad pool of interviewers, but have a much smaller admissions committee. So the feedback you're receiving on your candidacy may actually only reflect one person's opinion rather than the decision-making holder. The second is it often demonstrates a lack of confidence when you're asking for feedback in the actual interview scenario. Many medical schools will offer an opportunity to get feedback in the end of the cycle if you find yourself reapplying. I would highly recommend that because it does give you an opportunity to grow. But personally, I would use that time at the end to ask questions about the school and about what you would find if you were a medical student rather than feedback on your interview.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. Just one more in regards to operational things. Can anyone share in regards to, in this virtual space, thoughts or feelings about attire, virtual backgrounds, etc., just the general visual perception and how applicants can make sure that they're not falling under any of the usual red flags?
So I think attire should be treated just like you would if you were going to be in person. So you should be dressing for the interview. Virtual background is a little bit more difficult. Schools may prefer not to have a background on, but schools are very understanding that you may not have a place or a laptop. So you may not have a laptop that can handle virtual backgrounds, and you may not have a place where it's easy to do that interview. So definitely reaching out beforehand to make sure that you can find a spot that will be quiet, that will be distracted free to do that interview. And being thoughtful about that background can be helpful. Certainly, if you're going to do it in your bedroom, you should make your bed. Like, so there's a few things that you should be, it's not like any background will go, and you should think about it, but definitely reach out. If you find yourself in a situation where you don't think you have a good thing, someone can find a space for you, whether it's the school, whether it's your undergrad school, something can be worked out.
The only thing I would add to that is that sometimes surprises happen and your background might need to change in the middle of your interview. We had an applicant a few years ago whose dorm fire alarm went off during their interview, and they called and they brought the thing and did the rest of the interview outside, and that applicant earned acceptance, right? They were adaptable, they were flexible. Alternatively, we've had people only dress the top halves of themselves, and we had one candidate stand up and demonstrate their undergarments to us during one of the breaks, which did not earn them an acceptance. And so a modicum of professionalism across the board, as well as really realizing that not everything's going to go perfect, and we're okay with that. We're working with you. We want to get to know you. We're using one of our coveted interview spots on you, which means we're interested in you.
I am without words. So clearly, pants, skirt, etc., is necessary. You can only not wear pants if you're Donald Duck or Winnie the Pooh. So, and even then, be careful. Dr. Copeland, did you have anything else to add? Okay, and great. Thank you for talking about a little bit about that adaptability, the flexibility that things can change, and maybe preparing for a plan B so you know what that would be, let alone, especially internet connections aren't always something we can rely on, etc. So thank you so much.
Can I add something to that?
Please, of course. Thanks.
So I think there's a lot of like difficulty with finding the perfect environment to have like the interview, and as Dr. Linton has mentioned, like it's difficult to have like a perfect environment where you can't control if like a fire alarm goes off. But something good that has come out of like virtual interviews is that you can use your background to your advantage too. I have not had this experience specifically with medical school interviews, but I've interviewed individuals virtually where they had a very interesting like artwork that they've created that was placed in their background, or like they were passionate about advocacy, so they had like their homelands like a flag behind them. Of course, it's like you have to be like very thoughtful about what you put in your background, so it shouldn't be distracting, but it kind of creates like it could be like a point of like starting a conversation with the interviewer. Like we started to ask them about like, hey, like, did you create that like artwork or things like that? Of course, don't have like something too distracting, but if there's something that you can use your background and environment to your advantage, it's obviously a good idea.
Did anyone have anything to respond to LaDon? No? All right. We definitely have lots of questions to go through. A lot of our attendees are wondering, should they take the time in their interview to respond with answers that are not on their application? Should they mention things that are on the application and enhance those answers? Should it be a balance of both or something completely different? I just want to make sure they're using that time strategically with their interviewer.
I can start with this one. Because we use primarily the MMI, we also are blinded. Our interviewers are blinded to your application, so they won't know if it's on your application or not. The most important thing is to answer the question and use what best supports your answer. And so that may be something that's not on your application, or maybe something on your application. I don't think, like, you wouldn't want to do name dropping for the sake of name dropping. You want to be focusing on how to best articulate your answer to the question.
I echo everything Dr. Copeland said there, and I only would add that there's a balance between the blinding. So some schools will be blinded and some won't. And you might not know that until your interview day. I would, again, kind of take some time before your interviews and think about what are the things that you want to make sure people hear about you, that are the things that either set you apart or bring you joy or convinced you that medicine is for you, and have those highlighted. The only thing I would say to make sure you do include, if it's not in your application, is any new experience that's really shifted or changed you that you didn't include in your AMCAS because you submitted it in May or June and you're interviewing in January. You may have something new that you may want to add or highlight.
There we go. Wonderful. I very much enjoy when folks can echo it, because I feel like then that's the strong message. Definitely pay attention to what is being told, so you don't fall under that same pitfall. Sometimes at the end of interviews, if there's time, the interviewer asks if they have any questions. So what should they ask? What should they not ask?
I can start with this one. Oh, did you want to go, Dr. Copeland?
No, that's fine.
I would say, do not ask something you already got the answer to when you weren't paying attention earlier, because that can be a little obvious. So, and it's not that we're expecting you to remember everything, but don't ask something that makes it look like you weren't paying attention, right? I think that can be troubling. Do ask specific questions that show you know something about the school and build upon that. especially for those of us we're a state institution, right? And so we're really trying to show connection to our state and our region of the country. So asking about things that relate to the mission or vision of the school that help us to see that you're going to be a good fit can also be really helpful.
I would agree. It's just like every job interview you're going to go on, is those questions show that you have researched what this job is about. It shows that you definitely want to grow, and you're looking for a place that will help support that growth. And so it is annoying if you ask a question. I'm like, the students just told you this. I know what their talk is. On the other hand, it doesn't, there's a breadth of areas where you can ask questions from.
Adan or Atif? No. Do you remember what you asked, if you asked?
One that I always also.
Oh, let's give Atif a moment. Like I said, you have to be prepared for all sorts of contingencies.
Am I back? I'm alive?
Yes,
Okay.
you are back.
Sorry.
No worries.
Blame the school's Wi-Fi. But they one question I saw somebody else ask, and I always kind of kept it in my back pocket, was, to ask somebody like, what's one thing they like about working at the school, and one thing that, they'd maybe change, or, because that can, listen to what they say they like, and, hopefully it's something good and all that. But the second part of the question can be really informative, really valuable, really, especially, I mean, that's where you can really sort of psychoanalyze the person as well. And, maybe don't do that, but it's, maybe if you've read something online about a school and then that person says that as well, or something, you can, that's a way to dig a little deeper. And, people, I think, tend to like that question as well. Like, it shows you're thinking beyond just, it's a little deeper question to ask. So.
I think I totally agree with that. Also, you can, again, use this opportunity as well to reinforce the things that you're passionate about. So if you're interested in community service, especially if you've done research on your school, you can say, hey, like, I've seen you work with some small community hospitals, how can medical students be involved in that? If you're passionate about research, you can ask them about what type of fundings they have available, things that are, of course, if it's not right on their website and it's so easy to see, but show that you've done research, and also that you're passionate about and want to continue the things that you have mentioned on your application longitudinally.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. I have two more questions in regards to general interviewing, and then we definitely have a lot regarding MMIs. But I want to make sure some audience members have talked about possibly having a physical condition that may cause them to stutter, eye contact, etc. Maybe there is some sort of neurodivergency, or they live with a disability. Should they talk about it? Should they not? Is that something to disclose, or just go as it and, do the best you can?
I think it's a personal decision. I think I would recommend that you discuss whatever adversity you've overcome, and that may include disability, that may include experiencing discrimination as a result of your religious affiliation or being part of the LGBTQ+ community. It may experience overcoming mental illness, whatever that is. Number one, I would not include anything in your written application that you're not comfortable talking about in an interview, because if it's in your written application, then it could come up in an interview. And I think that's really important. Schools are not supposed to ask you about things that they see based on your worn identity that isn't in your written application. And so I think that's also really important. And I think that I would encourage you to think about what you want to include about yourself. I think the most important thing is I would really talk with mentors and advisors, particularly your pre-medical advisor at your school, as well as any other mentors you have, about what you think might help you to both put your best foot forward, and also make sure that you're going to a medical school where you're going to feel included being your fullest self. And so I think there's that balance between those two things that can really help us to better understand you. We at our school are a holistic school, and we do try very hard to account for as much diversity in all forms as possible. And so I think that those experiences of having overcome whatever adversity it is helps us to understand that you may better relate to your future patients. And so I think it can be helpful if you're comfortable talking about it. But there's always times where people have overcome experiences that they're not ready to talk about. And so I think that's where you want to really use some good judgment in terms of how much you want to share.
I'd agree. I think that's excellent advice. And I think definitely checking with your mentors, because what you may believe is going to be an obvious impediment or disability may not be obvious. So reflect on that, think about it, get some advice about approaching it. We have accepted students with a stutter, but I don't remember that person explaining that in the interview, but there are times where maybe it makes sense that you do need to give an explanation. And so definitely do your fact checking, do your practicing before coming in. With the bottom line of being comfortable, knowing whether you're comfortable sharing this or not, and knowing whether there's a strength from sharing this that you can share, that would help and would help your application. Thank
you. So this one is one that is difficult when you're interviewing. But what do you recommend? And I would love to hear from the medical students as well. If your interviewer asks something inappropriate or unethical during your interview, you feel uncomfortable, etc. What are your recommendations? Both, well, ideally in that moment.
I think go ahead.
You got it. I guess because that's really a tough situation, right? Because there's definitely like a power differential, and how do you deal with that? Me, I would probably, my brain would probably be turning 100 miles an hour while I kind of just like awkwardly laugh at it a little bit, and I guess I would say something along the lines of, I'm not really comfortable answering that, or, because there's going to be times just in life in general where, you need to kind of stand firm on certain things, right? So don't feel pressured that, hey, there's this physician asking me something that I'm not comfortable asking, or, and really if it's something that's really and truly shouldn't be asked. And even if you're not sure, I would say just send an email to the admissions office afterwards, run it by them. They're never going to be angry or upset with you that you just are checking in with them. So that would be my thoughts on it.
I think I've never had such an experience, and I think it's easy to like talk about it now, like, especially because we're not like in the actual situation. But I think you can, because as Atif mentioned, like you have similar situations when you're in like med school interacting with other people where maybe like the person on the admission committee is like misunderstanding something or is not communicating it properly, or they don't know your background. So you have to kind of like gauge what their intention is, because sometimes there's like some barriers in communication and that might come across as something that might be offensive. So I think something that is always helpful, if there's any clarity that you can get around their statement, and be like, I don't know, like the specific situations, but you can be like, what do you mean about that? Or like, just ask them more questions to make sure that it's actually, if they have negative intents. But if they do, I think it's always, and especially if you feel like it might affect your chances of fair opportunity to get into that program, it's always a good idea to send an email. But I think it's always good to make sure that like that person is like not miscommunicating something, or like you're not misunderstanding it at that spot. And honestly, if you clarify that, I think that goes a long way, because it's very easy to misunderstand things on a daily basis as a medical student too. So if you're able to like stand up for yourself and defend something that is like important to you, and the admission officer or the admission committee may not necessarily at that spot understand it. That shows that you're able to advocate for yourself and maybe advocate for your patients in the future as well.
I loved both responses. I do think it's that balance of what do you do in the moment, as you certainly don't want to become accusatory in the moment. So choosing to redirect the question, choosing to purposely misunderstand it, or choosing to ask a clarification question like, oh, is this what you are asking, are all great ways of handling in the moment. And then reporting afterwards, I think, is also appropriate.
Wonderful. Dr. Linton, I just want to make sure I give you an opportunity. You're good. All right.
Echoing the brilliance here.
So we're going into the wonderful world of MMIs. And if someone doesn't understand the scenario, needs a little bit more clarification, are they able to request clarification, or should they just be able to take the scenario as is, as understood by them? Sorry.
I fear that I'm always saying, well, it's individual, it depends on the school, but I think you have two options. So definitely you can ask, and the interviewer will let you know. What are they allowed to say? There are sometimes clarifications that we realize in the moment as we share between interviewers that are needed, and those are usually provided up front. Otherwise, if they're saying, well, no, just please reread it for a moment, then you can give I'm interpreting the scenario as this, and then give your answer. I don't know at your school sort of how you handle that.
I think that's a great question. And I think your MMI interviewers will be trained to handle questions, either as I'm not going to answer your question, or I'm going to answer your question and they'll answer it. And so I think I would be prepared. I think it's totally fair if you have a question to ask. The other thing you can do is before the MMIs, most schools will kind of go through the interview day with you at the beginning of the day. And you can say, if I have a question about the MMIs, is it acceptable for me to ask a clarifying question? And then you'll know the answer kind of heading in. And I think that that's completely fair when your admissions team is prepping you for the day to ask that question from the start.
Thank you. In regards to scenarios where you have had that experience happen in your real life, would you, or should they share that? Should they give a different answer? Should they acknowledge I have been through this? How forthcoming should they be?
I think it depends on whether you're acting or whether you're being yourself in the MMI. So again, this is going to be school dependent. For our school, we have 4 scenarios where you're acting in that scenario as a provider with a standardized patient, and 1 scenario is with me. And so I think it becomes fairly obvious when you're reading the scenario whether that individual or personal example could be woven in a way that makes sense. What I would not suggest would be sticking personal information in just to kind of read me your CV rather than actually answering the question.
Exactly. We usually get the opposite of the question of what if I don't have a personal experience as reflected of the scenario. And I think it's perfectly fine in that situation to also be honest and say, this may not have happened. This hasn't happened to me personally, but maybe it happened to a best friend, or I can imagine what my response would be, and then proceed.
Great. How would you recommend preparing for an MMI?
I have a hard time with that question.
Thank you. Thank you for being honest and sharing that. I love that. Thank you.
What I tell, in my school, we tried not to do very controversial topics, but I do think if you could practice being able to present your answer, your reasoning, your rationale to a controversial topic, you will get used to the fact that 4 minutes, 5 minutes is a lot of time to present an answer. And so that it's just this comfort of, I can walk through my reasoning, and it doesn't take that much time. to do so.
I honestly think one of the biggest keys to the MMI is being able to calm your mind in the moment. And I think where we see students struggle sometimes is their anxiety becomes difficult to manage. And so really practicing, you may get a rush of nerves when you read that scenario, and you might feel like you're starting to panic just because you don't think of something right away. So honestly, also practicing not knowing an answer and calming yourself down, whether it's breath work or visualization or whatever you need to do, because I think once the scenario actually opens and starts is your opportunity to be able to demonstrate that you read something tough and you calm down. And I think that is really, really important, because with these briefer scenarios, I don't have the opportunity to have you warm up by the end of the interview, right? And so really practicing being able to kind of pause and take a deep breath and let your mind do its job, because you're so ready for this. You're ready. You wouldn't be interviewing if you weren't ready to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for those words. I think interviewees need to understand you've been asked to come, so that's already a thumbs up. Now you need to put yourself forward. In regards to MMIs and interviews in general, with just general questions, are there any thoughts or feelings about bringing notes, taking notes, etc.? Are there any perceptions regarding that?
It's another rule you should ask prior to getting into the interview day. We do not allow notes, and we don't want you taking notes, but other schools may be different. So it's one of those you should determine what the rules are and what the guidelines are around the interview.
Okay, wonderful. I have just one more quick question. Any advice for reapplicants?
We have a lot of reapplicants who end up matriculating. And so I think the first thing is, it's not game over if you're reapplying. In fact, I can think of one applicant from this cycle who showed up as a completely different applicant this cycle. The applicant applied, got feedback, took all of the feedback, including feedback on how to do an interview, and showed up as a completely different applicant and was one of our top rated applicants for the whole cycle. So I think it's not over. If you don't get feedback, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage. And so making sure you reach, not all schools will offer feedback, but many do. And so utilizing that feedback to help strengthen your candidacy and showing that you've at least listened to it. What not to do is argue with the feedback. I would not suggest that. And so saying that the feedback is bad, you don't have to take all of it, but I would not argue with it, because it shows a level of non-growth mindset that is definitely not going to sell you well for medical school. And then again, treating every interaction that you have as one that you can learn and grow from. And we're looking for growth. We know that you guys are all, that you are all in your development and you're learning this journey with us. And so we're not going to hold something against you from the previous cycle if you show up in a new way.
I agree. I think it's that reflecting on your application, growing and going forward again.
Perfect. So we are at 2 minutes to go. I want to make sure all four of you have an opportunity. If you have any supportive words or parting words that you'd like to share in the last couple of moments for our audience.
I guess I'll start because I need to run to class in a second, but just, keep at it. This is it can definitely be a long process, but, do your due diligence, reach out to others for help. There are so many people who've been through this before you. And yeah, just go out there and make it happen. You can do it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Atif. Well, thank you again to our medical students and our medical school admission staff for your generous time, your candor, your honesty in regards to these questions, because I know how important it is and how specific an interview can be to the process. So again, we just appreciate your time and everything that you shared with us today, especially about MMIs, because this is something new that we're being able to present. And for our audience, we hope this session was both helpful and encouraging to everyone. This was a recorded session, so you will have access to it at the same portal that you're watching it on. But thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you, LaDon. Thank you, Dr. Linton and Dr. Copeland.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.
Good luck, everyone. Thanks.